She stood alone on the icy bridge, her heart pounding louder than the wind around her, ready to let go of everything, her past, her pain, even the hope that once flickered quietly inside her. She had reached the edge, literally and metaphorically. And just as she took that final, silent breath, a rusty old pickup truck pulled up behind her, its engine rumbling against the silence of the snow. Inside was a quiet man who knew nothing about the woman in black on the bridge. He only knew that something felt wrong. That stopping was not a choice. It was something his heart demanded. What Colton Reeves didn't realize in that frozen instant was this. In trying to save a stranger from falling, he would end up saving himself in ways he hadn't known he needed. If you believe in stories that start with heartbreak and end in healing, if you're moved by tales where love comes softly, dressed as kindness, then stay with me. Because what happened that winter night in Pine Hollow wasn't just chance. It was the beginning of something none of them saw coming. If this story touched your heart, give it a like. Let's see if we can reach 1,000 likes. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another Soul First Stories. A moment where a grieving widow and a struggling single father crossed paths, and neither of them ever walked away the same. The snow that year had arrived early, too early. But it wasn't the kind of snowfall that made you want to drink cocoa by the fire. No, it came like a warning, wind-whipped, relentless, blanketing everything in white by dusk and biting at your skin like regret. Colton adjusted the collar of his flannel coat as he guided his aging pickup truck onto the bridge outside town, the kind of narrow crossing where silence lingered and ghosts could whisper if they wanted. His daughter Daisy sat beside him, bundled in so many layers of pink scarves and sleepy comfort she barely looked human. She was humming a tune to herself, her eyes half-lidded. "You okay, Bug?" Colton asked, his voice warm but edged with fatigue. "Just sleepy," she murmured. "Are we almost home?" "Almost," he replied, and then he saw her, a figure, motionless, standing right in the middle of the bridge where no one should be. No coat, just a black dress that clung to her thin frame and long dark hair caught in the snow-spun wind. She was facing the edge, not moving, not waving, just there, still and silent. Colton's heart clenched, a primal fear surging. He hit the brakes, the truck jolted. "Stay in the car," he told Daisy firmly. He didn't wait. He flung the door open, boots slipping on ice as he bolted into the storm. The wind cut like knives, but he didn't stop. "Ma'am," he called out, voice rough and urgent. "Are you all right?" No answer. She took a step, then another, and with a small, nearly imperceptible motion she climbed the rail. Then she fell. Without thinking, Colton ran. Every part of him surged forward as he vaulted the rail. Time slowed. His heart pounded so hard it drowned out the howling wind. The plunge into the river below was a shock of darkness and cold, like being swallowed by grief. The water stole his breath in an instant, the current slamming into him like a memory he wasn't ready for. Still, he swam. Her body floated not far away, lifeless, drifting. He kicked hard, every muscle screaming. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, refusing to let go. His fingers went numb, but his grip did not falter. Somewhere, far away, headlights flickered along the road. Help was coming, but he wasn't waiting. By the time he dragged her to the muddy riverbank, he collapsed beside her, lungs burning, chest heaving. He reached for a pulse. Faint. But there, at the hospital, she remained silent. Not when they pulled the water from her lungs, not when they asked her name, not when they offered warm clothes or gentle words. She was present, but unreachable, like someone who had returned from a place no one else could understand. Colton stood outside her hospital room, coat still damp, hands deep in his pockets. Daisy clung to his leg, peering in with innocent concern. "Is she going to be okay, Daddy?" she asked softly. He looked at the woman in the bed, pale, bruised, small beneath the sheets. "I think so, baby." Her name, they later learned, was Willa Monroe. She was 31, a widow. Her husband had died only 6 weeks ago. That information came from a nurse who'd found a water-damaged driver's license tucked in the back of one of Willa's boots. There were no emergency contacts, no ring, just her name and an ocean of pain. No one came. No one called. "Some people fall so deep," the nurse said gently, "it takes someone else jumping in to pull them back." Colton didn't answer, but the words stayed with him. 3 days later, Willa still hadn't spoken. The hospital was preparing to discharge her. She had nowhere to go, no one to call. So Colton did the only thing that made sense to his heart. He brought her home. The guest house behind his cabin wasn't much, just a refurbished shed, really, with patched-up windows and a space heater that rattled like bones in winter. But it was warm and safe and his. Willa didn't argue. She didn't say anything. She stepped inside, sat on the edge of the bed and stared. That was enough. "I'll bring you dinner later," Colton said gently. No pressure. She nodded. That tiny motion, just a tilt of the head, was the first thing she'd done on her own. Daisy, of course, had a million questions. Why was she on the bridge? Why was she crying? Is she staying forever? Colton didn't have answers. He just tucked her in that night and whispered, "Sometimes people break, sweetheart, but that doesn't mean they're gone. Sometimes they just need time to find the pieces." That night, as Colton stood at the sink, staring out at the trees buried in snow, he saw a flicker of light in the guest house. Just a flicker, but enough to mean one thing. She hadn't given up, not completely, and neither would he. Pencils still untouched, sketch pads unopened, sharpeners and charcoal sticks wrapped snug in their original paper bands. He placed the box carefully just inside the guest house door and left without knocking, without saying a word. He didn't linger. But the next morning, the box was gone. Not a word was said, yet something had shifted. By the end of that week, Willow began coming into the main cabin for meals. Not every meal, and not with everyone, but enough to fill the kitchen with more than just the clinking of forks and quiet murmurs about weather or chores. Her presence brought a different kind of warmth. She spoke now and then, mostly in Daisy's company. The little girl had an uncanny way of coaxing words from the quietest corners of people's hearts, like a fisherman gently drawing in a line. It was subtle, but powerful. One morning, over toast and slices of orange, Daisy asked her plainly, "Do you have a mom?" Willow hesitated. "She passed away when I was young." "Mine too," Daisy replied without flinching, as if loss was just another fact of life. "But my dad says sometimes the people we lose send us new people to help us." Then, pausing meaningfully, she added, "Maybe that's what happened." Colton, seated nearby with a coffee mug in hand, looked up, startled by the weight of the moment. Willow met his eyes for the first time that morning, and something unsaid passed between them, an unspoken wonder, and something heavier still. "You think so?" Willow asked Daisy, her voice soft, uncertain. Daisy nodded with a smile. "You're sad, but you're also nice." Willow let out a small laugh, rusted and uncertain, as if it hadn't been used in a long while. It surprised her, even more than it surprised them. Colton smiled into his cup, the warmth of Daisy's innocent wisdom touching something deeper inside him. Maybe the kid was onto something. Later that week, Colton invited Willow to join one of his woodworking sessions with Daisy. She agreed, though cautiously. She took a chair in the corner of the workshop where father and daughter were crafting a simple birdhouse. Daisy chattered cheerfully as Colton guided her small hands, showing her how to smooth the wooden edges. Willow watched them, how his steady hands guided hers, how her tiny fingers mirrored his careful movements. It was intimate, yet unassuming. No expectations, no pressure, just the quiet miracle of being together. When Daisy excused herself to fetch juice, Willow finally asked the question that had been circling inside her for days. "Did it take you a long time to feel normal again?" Colton didn't answer right away. He focused on the wood beneath his hands, smoothing its edge thoughtfully. Then he looked up. "I don't think I ever felt normal again," he said gently. "I just got better at carrying the weight." Willow nodded, biting her bottom lip. "You don't have to rush anything," Colton added. "No one's waiting for you to be fixed." "I don't want to be fixed," she whispered. "I just don't want to feel invisible anymore." "You're not invisible." She looked at him again, and this time she almost believed him. That night, she lingered in the kitchen after dinner. Daisy had fallen asleep on the couch, crayon still clutched in her small hand. Colton lifted her gently and carried her to bed. When he returned, Willow was at the sink, rinsing dishes. "You don't have to do that," he said softly. "I know," she replied, "but I want to." They stood side by side, her washing, him drying. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was dense, filled with the things they couldn't yet say. Still, it felt safe. Then, finally, Willow said it. "I think I'd like to draw again." "For real?" Colton asked, voice low and hopeful. She nodded. Yeah, I think the world could use a little more of that. Thank you, she added after a pause, for giving me a quiet room. Colton folded the dish towel neatly and set it on the counter. Sometimes, he said, a quiet room is where the healing begins. That night a storm rolled in just past midnight. First a whisper of wind hissing against the windows, testing the old bones of the cabin. Then a deeper thrum, a steady rhythm of snow tumbling from the sky, blanketing the earth in soft, relentless white. Colton woke instinctively, trained by past winters to listen when nature whispered warnings. He checked the thermostat, turned up the heat, and gazed toward the guest house. The lamp by Willow's window was on, dim but steady. Just enough light to say, "I'm here!" By morning, the world was wrapped in white. The roads had vanished. Trees leaned under heavy snow. Mailboxes looked like tired men slumped after a long day. But inside the cabin, the air was warm with cinnamon and oatmeal. Daisy, in mismatched pajamas and a tangle of hair, sat colouring quietly at the table. Colton flipped through radio stations with one hand and poured coffee with the other. The announcer said cheerfully, "No school, no mail, just hunker down, folks." Colton expected the snow. What he didn't expect was the soft knock at the back door. It was Willow. She stood bundled in a thick wool coat someone had donated. Snowflakes clung to her hair, and her cheeks were pink from the cold. In her hands she held a foil-covered casserole dish. "I hope it's okay," she said, shyly. "I had a box of pasta, and, well, I just wanted to say thank you." Colton blinked. "You cooked?" She shrugged. "I remembered how." He stepped aside, letting her in. Daisy beamed. "Miss Willer." Colton took the warm, heavy dish from her hands. "It smells amazing. I promise it tastes better than it looks." "That's a low bar," he teased. She laughed, and it sounded lighter now, less cracked, less hollow. They ate together by the fireplace, watching snow dance in the windows. Willow told Daisy about the time she and her husband got stranded in a Michigan snowstorm and slept in their car for 2 nights, huddled in blankets and surviving on crackers. Daisy was wide-eyed. Was it scary? "A little," Willow said, "but also kind of wonderful." Colton watched her, how she spoke, how her hands moved with memory, how her eyes softened with nostalgia. She was beginning to thaw, slowly, but surely. After lunch, Daisy dashed off to build a pillow fort, and the 2 adults were left by the fire. "Thank you for letting me stay," Willow said quietly. "You don't have to thank me. I do. You didn't have to save me. You definitely didn't have to let me in." Colton leaned back. "You were never a burden." "I felt like one," she admitted. He studied her, the faint scar beneath her temple, the way her shoulders curled in when she was quiet. "Willow," he said gently, "you've been carrying too much alone." She didn't respond right away. Her fingers toyed with the hem of her sleeve. "I thought, if I could just disappear quietly, no one would notice. Maybe they'd even feel relieved." Colton swallowed hard. "I felt that too. After my wife passed, some days it was like dragging myself out of a cave with bricks strapped to my chest. But Daisy needed me. She kept asking where her socks were. She didn't let me go under." He paused. "You didn't have a Daisy. You had grief and silence and blame. That's more than most people could carry." Willow stared into the flames. "I didn't want to die. I just didn't know how to keep living." Colton nodded slowly. "Then let's figure it out, together." She looked at him, really looked. Her eyes were the colour of an oncoming storm, but in their depths was something else. Not hope, not yet, but perhaps the faint trace of it. That night, after Daisy had fallen asleep in her pillow fort, Willow stayed behind to help with the dishes. Colton handed her a towel. They worked in silence, comfortable now, familiar. "I haven't felt this still in a long time," she said at last. "Still is good," Colton replied. "I used to think silence was the enemy. I thought if I just kept moving, kept filling the air with noise, I wouldn't have to feel anything." He paused. "And now?" She looked over at him. "Now I think maybe quiet is where the healing begins." Colton smiled. "Told you the guest house was magic," she chuckled. "Feels more like haunted. Same thing some days. They stood there, close but not touching, bound by something deeper." When she stepped outside, she paused at the door, coat pulled tight. "Good night, Colton." "Good night, Willa." He watched her walk through the snow, a silhouette moving toward the place she hadn't wanted to live, and now wasn't sure she could leave. The next morning, sun broke through after days of grey. It wasn't warm, February didn't offer that, but light cut across the snow like kindness. A hush hung over Pine Hollow. The storm had passed, taking something heavy with it. Colton stood on the porch, coffee steaming in his hand. The wood creaked beneath his boots. Through the guest-house window, he spotted Willow at the table, head bent, her hands in motion, sketching. He smiled. Later, Daisy asked to build another birdhouse. Colton pulled out old pine slats and set up their little station on the porch. "Can I use the sander?" Daisy asked eagerly. "With gloves and supervision." Willow arrived as they were measuring. A scarf hung loose at her neck, a sketch-pad in hand. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "Not at all," Colton said. "You're just in time for sawdust." Daisy grinned. "Want to help?" Willow hesitated, then stepped forward. "I've never built anything out of wood." Colton handed her a small carving knife. "Then today's your first." She was clumsy at first, pressing too hard, carving too deep, but Colton said nothing. He simply kept working beside her, letting her find her rhythm, and she did. At first the lines were random, tentative, but they slowly began to take shape, intentional, bold. Colton looked over and saw it. A heart. Not a cartoon heart, but one that looked real. Rough, imperfect, beautiful. Willow stared at it, surprised. "I didn't plan that." "Sometimes," Colton said softly, "our hearts show up even when we're not looking for them." That evening she placed the carved heart on the guest-house windowsill. The fading sunlight caught its curves, casting a soft golden shadow. She stood there for a long time, watching the trees, the roofline of the cabin, and feeling, finally, a little less invisible. Colton leaned quietly against the kitchen counter, his eyes soft but steady. "You're still that person," he said gently. Willow slowly shook her head, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "She died the day Ben did." There was a moment of stillness, as if the very air had paused to listen. Colton didn't rush to fill it. He never did. Instead, he spoke with quiet conviction. "Maybe not," he murmured. "Maybe she's just been waiting for you to catch up to her again." Willow looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears this time, but with something harder to name. Maybe recognition, maybe grace, maybe the fragile beginning of hope. "Why are you always so gentle with me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Colton's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "Because I know how it feels," he said. "To be broken, to be exhausted, to still show up, even when it hurts." Willow inhaled then, deep and full, as if filling her lungs for the first time in months. "Then I want to try," she said quietly. "I want to really live again, not just survive." Without a word, Colton opened a drawer and retrieved a fresh block of soft, untouched wood. He placed it carefully in her hand. "Then carve a new heart," he said, "as many as you need." That night, in the solitude of her small guest room, Willow didn't cry. Instead, she picked up her pencil and began to draw. She sketched hearts, not perfect ones, but honest ones. One had a deep crack through the middle. Another was whole but worn and weathered. One was completely open. And then she drew Colton's hands, steady, protective, cradling a small wooden heart in their palms. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't fall asleep with tears on her pillow. She just slept. The thaw didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, subtly. Not with the dramatic melt of snow, but with longer sunbeams crawling across the kitchen floor, with fewer logs needed for the fireplace, with air that didn't bite quite as sharply. It was still February, still cold, but the sharp edge of winter had softened. Willow had developed a habit now. Each morning she wrapped herself in a scarf, tucked her sketch-pad under her arm, and walked slowly down the dirt road. She always stopped at the same curve, the one where the pines opened just enough to reveal the quiet silhouette of Pine Hollow below. The town hadn't moved on without her. It was still there, still slow, still waiting. But on this morning, as she made her way back up the path, she heard voices, unfamiliar and sharp. Male voices. Raised. She froze. The sound was coming from Colton's front porch. Her heart began to pound, instinctively recognizing the voices even before her eyes could confirm. Everett Monroe, Ben's brother, tall, rigid, with that too neat hair of a man who wore grief like a necktie. And beside him their father, Hank, a larger man, louder, with arms that had once embraced Willow like family. But now his eyes passed over her like she was a smudge on glass. Colton stood between them and the doorway, his arms folded, unmoving, protective. She's not your concern anymore, Colton was saying firmly. She's our son's widow, Hank barked. You think she can just vanish after what she did? Colton's jaw tightened. She didn't do anything wrong. She sent him to work that day, Hank snapped. She begged him not to go, Colton shot back. He chose to, like every adult man does. Your son made a decision and it cost him his life. You're grieving. I get that. But your grief doesn't give you the right to lay your pain at her feet. That was when Willa stepped forward, boots crunching through the snow. The three men turned to face her. Everett's gaze narrowed coldly. We're here to take her back, to settle the estate. I have nothing left to settle, Willa said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. Ben is gone. The house isn't mine. You made that clear a long time ago. You abandoned your role, Hank spat. No, Willa said calmly. You took it from me. A heavy silence followed. Then Colton, quiet but unwavering, spoke again. You've said what you came to say. Now leave. Everett took a step forward. Who are you to keep her here? I'm the man who pulled her out of a river, Colton replied, because she had no one left to fight for her, and I'm not letting you undo that. Willa felt something rise inside her then. Heat, yes, but not from shame. It was a fierce, quiet strength born of someone finally standing with her, not above her. You need to go, she said, her voice even. Everett opened his mouth again, but Hank placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Let's go, the older man muttered. She made her choice. As they walked away, Willa stood frozen, her hands trembling. Colton turned toward her, voice soft again. You okay? No, she whispered. But thank you. You shouldn't have to defend your right to exist, he said gently. And you shouldn't be surprised when someone finally does. Willa stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. I didn't expect anyone to, she admitted. Colton nodded. We'll get used to it. Later, they sat in the quiet kitchen, steam curling up from untouched mugs of tea. Daisy was out playing with a neighbour, blissfully unaware of the confrontation that had shaken the foundation of her mother's past. I thought seeing them would break me, Willa said suddenly, her eyes fixed on her hands. Colton waited. But it didn't, she continued. It hurt, but it didn't destroy me. That's progress, he said. It's something. She looked at him with open curiosity. Why did you do it? Why stand up for me like that? He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Because no one should be made to feel like they're less, especially not someone who's fought this hard just to breathe. Her throat tightened, her eyes stinging. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to. Still, I want to. Colton smiled softly. Then keep showing up, for yourself and for Daisy. That's more than enough. That night Willa didn't sleep. Instead, she lit a candle and opened her sketchpad. Her hand hesitated, unsure at first, but then it moved, slow, certain. She drew Ben. Not the broken man from the reports, not the cold body from the funeral. The real Ben, alive, smiling, wearing his winter jacket, holding her mittened hands, eyes full of light. And then, with a voice so quiet it could have been mistaken for a prayer, she whispered into the dark, I forgive you, and I forgive me too. She closed the sketchbook and let the candle burn low. The next morning, she brought the drawing to Colton. I want to leave the past where it belongs, she said, offering him the page. But I needed to see him once more, as he really was. Colton held it as if it were made of glass. He studied it for a long while. He'd be proud of you, he said softly. Willa blinked. I think I finally believe that. And then, as fate would have it, Willa found the box. She hadn't meant to. She was just helping Daisy look for an old storybook, the one with the mouse and the cheese shop, when she stumbled upon it in the storage closet. Behind coats and forgotten holiday decorations, tucked away, was a wooden box, dusty, unlabeled. She opened it gently. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Clara. That evening, after Daisy had gone to bed, Willa stood in the doorway of Colton's workshop, the box in her arms. I found these today, she said softly. Colton looked up, surprised but not angry. His rough hands gripped a chisel tightly. I wasn't snooping, she added quickly. They were just there. He nodded slowly. I know. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was heavier now, deeper. You wrote to her, Willa said, even after she was gone. Colton set the tool aside and wiped his hands. I started writing the night after the funeral. Didn't know what else to do with all the silence. Willa moved closer. Can I ask about her? He hesitated, then pulled out a stool. She was kind, quiet. The kind of person who baked too much and left extra loaves on doorsteps. She loved wildflowers, hated TV, made the best blueberry jam I've ever tasted. Then one day, while laughing with Daisy, she was just gone. Aneurysm. No warning. "I'm so sorry," Willa whispered. "It broke something in me," he said. "Not just the grief, the speed of it, the randomness." "And when the answers didn't come, you wrote," she finished for him. "They're beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the box. "You loved her well." "I tried," he replied. "She felt safe." "She did, and that scares you," Willa said, her voice trembling, "because you're starting to feel that way again, with me." He nodded, eyes locked on hers. "And it terrifies me." "Me too," she whispered. They sat for a long time in that silence, not afraid of it now. Willa reached into the box and opened the latest letter, dated just 3 weeks earlier. She read aloud. "Dear Clara, Daisy still asks if you can see her drawings. I tell her yes, because I believe it's true. I think you'd like the woman staying with us. She doesn't know it yet, but she's been saving me, in quiet ways. Just thought you should know. Love, Colton." Her hand trembled. "You wrote about me." "I didn't know how not to," he said. Willa's eyes welled, wide with wonder. "I wasn't looking to fall in love again," Colton said, "but I don't think I have a choice." "I'm not ready," she breathed. "You don't have to be," he said gently, "but I am." The next morning the box was gone. In its place, on the shelf where it once rested, was a single piece of paper, her handwriting, not his. It read, "Dear Clara, I think you'd be proud of him. I think you'd be glad he saved me, even when I didn't think I was worth saving. Thank you for loving him first. I promise I'll be gentle with his heart." That evening they didn't speak of the note. They simply sat on the porch, Daisy curled between them beneath a shared blanket. The sky stretched out in soft shades of lavender and gold. Colton poured warm cider into their mugs. Willa sketched the pine trees beyond the horizon. No grand declarations, no decisions, just peace, and the quiet, certain knowing that something inside both of them had finally shifted, for good. Every piece of that morning felt as if it had been stitched together with quiet intention, as if someone had gently pressed seeds into soft spring soil, trusting without question that they would bloom. It was opening day, a Saturday. The wind carried a chill that tugged at coat hems and ruffled hair, but the sun, in a rare moment of generosity, shone warmly as if offering its blessing. Willa set up her modest wooden table outside the old library, her hands moving with calm purpose as she arranged baskets of warm scones and golden-topped muffins, steam rising from a thermos of spiced cider. She hadn't put out flyers or posted online. She didn't need to. The scent of fresh-baked comfort carried through the air like a whispered invitation, drawing people in, step by curious step. Some came because they'd seen her kindness before, perhaps in the form of a small gift basket left on their porch during winter. Others arrived without knowing why, only that something warm and good beckoned. A few paused to chat, most lingered longer than they meant to. One older woman, wearing a threadbare shawl that had clearly seen many winters, took a bite, then paused, eyes closed, face still. "Tastes like something I didn't know I missed," she murmured. Willa blinked quickly, her throat tightening. "That's the kindest thing anyone's ever said about my food." The woman smiled gently. "Then don't let it be the last." By noon, everything was gone, every crumb. Willa packed up slowly, her bones absorbing the sunlight like a long-lost memory. The warmth didn't just settle on her skin, it settled inside her, deep and quiet and new. Colton arrived just as she was folding the tablecloth into neat squares. He offered her a smile that said he'd seen every part of her effort. "You did it," he said simply. "I did," she replied, a little breathless, as if realizing it for the first time. "How do you feel?" "Hungry," she laughed. "I didn't eat a thing all morning." Without missing a beat, he handed her a neatly wrapped sandwich. "Figured." She took it, their fingers brushing for just a second longer than necessary. "Thank you for helping me believe I could do this." "You did that yourself," he said, not entirely. They sat on the library steps, shoulder to shoulder, eating without words. But it wasn't the sandwich that filled her, it was the presence beside her. The silence, the shared space. For just a moment she leaned gently into his shoulder, and he didn't shift away. That evening, Willa returned to the quiet guest house to find a box waiting on the porch. No note, but inside, New oven mitts, a blank recipe journal, and a small jar of dried lavender. She didn't need a signature to know who had left it, and she didn't need a mirror to know she was no longer the woman who had once stood on a bridge, ready to disappear. She was someone different now. Someone whose hands shaped dough, whose neighbours waved and smiled, whose daughter drew hearts in her lunchbox, and whose life was quietly folding into another's without force or fear. For the first time since Ben's death, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. She was curious about it. In Pine Hollow, spring never announced itself all at once. It crept in, hesitant and soft-footed, like a deer at the edge of the woods. Snow melted in splotchy patches. Moss along fence posts turned green first, then small blades of grass, resilient, almost defiant, pushed up through the soil, whispering, "We're still here." And so was Willa, not just surviving, but rooted. She began rising before dawn, her hands busy with flour and cinnamon while the sky was still lavender grey. On those mornings, when the windows were cracked and the fog hadn't lifted, Colton would stir awake to the smell of rising bread and warm sugar, his heart oddly steadied by it. He never said it out loud, but those moments, those mornings, felt like peace. Daisy, ever the small observer of big things, seemed to sense the shift. She didn't say much, she didn't need to. One Sunday morning, with jam smeared across her cheek and coffee warm in her hands, Willa looked up just in time to hear the small voice say, "Do you love Miss Willa?" Colton nearly dropped the coffee pot. Willa froze, her spoon suspended mid-air. Unbothered, Daisy popped a blueberry in her mouth. "Because I think she loves you." Colton cleared his throat, flustered. "That's a big question, Bug." "It's not scary," Daisy said, matter of fact. "Miss Willa makes things not scary, even when it rains." Willa smiled softly, her heart aching in that sweet, quiet way. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." Daisy beamed. "It's true." They didn't talk about it again, not in words. But later that day, as Willa sorted her recipes on the porch and Colton fixed a squeaky hinge on her door, their hands met in passing. This time, neither pulled away. Days later, she found him in his workshop, hunched over a block of cedar, brow furrowed in concentration. "What are you making?" she asked gently. He didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Something for you, baby." Her heart stumbled. She didn't ask what, just stood beside him watching the careful curve he carved into the wood. "You're good with your hands," she said. He gave a quiet laugh. "It's about the only thing I know how to be good at." "That's not true." He looked at her, direct, open. "You're good with people, even when you don't want to be. You listen more than most, and you've never made me feel like I'm broken." Colton laid down the chisel. "You're not broken, Willa. You're blooming." She inhaled, sudden and sharp, not because of the words, but because of the gentleness in which he offered them. "Thank you," she whispered. That night they sat on the porch steps, knees brushing, wrapped in twilight and cooling air. After a long pause, Willa asked, "Do you ever think about more?" He looked over, cautious. "More than this?" "More than surviving. More than friendship." He sipped his mug. "I do. But I'm scared I'll want too much and lose everything that matters." "You won't," she said, calm and certain. "You don't know that." "I do, because I know what it feels like to be held gently, and I know I'm not afraid of you." He turned toward her, struck silent. "You've never made me feel small," she added. "Not once, and I think that's what love should start with, safety, the kind that makes things grow." His voice was thick. "I don't want to rush you. You're not. Then what do we do?" She smiled, took his hand. "We let it grow, like spring, slow but steady." He curled his fingers around hers, not a confession, but an answer. Later that week, Daisy drew a picture and taped it to the fridge. 3 people holding hands in front of a house with a heart above it. A little dog nearby, grinning. "What's the heart for?" Colton asked. "It means," Daisy said with a grin. "You don't have to say it out loud." Willa saw it from the doorway, tears rising, not from grief, but from the fullness of being known. One morning, on a routine drive to the farmer's market, Willa's path curved past Pine Hollow Creek. And there it was, the bridge. That bridge, the one she'd once surrendered to, the one Colton had pulled her back from. She slowed, pulled over, sat quietly behind the wheel, her fingers trembling against the ignition. Then, with a breath both shaky and sure, she stepped out. The bridge looked smaller now, less like an edge, more like a page she'd turned. She walked to its center, closed her eyes, let the wind comb through her hair. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not letting me go." Colton found her there an hour later, not frantic, just instinct-led. When he saw her, standing calm and open, he didn't speak. He simply stood beside her. "You came," she said softly. "I'll always come." She nodded. "I needed to see it again, on my own terms." "It doesn't scare me now," she added. "It hurts, but it doesn't scare me." "That's not fear," he said. "That's healing." Then, eyes steady, she whispered, "I love you, Colton Reeves." He exhaled, staggered. "I love you too, Willa Munro. I think I have since that second cup of coffee." Later, back home, Daisy met them in the kitchen, flour on her elbows. "I made cookies." Willa bent low. "Your dad kissed me today." Daisy gasped. "On the mouth?" Willa laughed. "Yes, on the mouth." Finally, that night, all three curled on the couch, 3 bodies beneath a too small blanket, hearts perfectly full. Willa whispered, "I never thought I'd get to come back." "You didn't," Colton replied. "You moved forward." And on a bridge that once nearly took her, she had found something better than survival. She had found home. "Bridge, all the time," he said, "and every time I do, I thank God I was paying attention." Willa closed her eyes. "You gave me back my life." Colton looked at her, truly looked, and said, "No, you took it back. I just reminded you where to look." The next morning was bright and clear, the first truly warm day of the season. Friends and neighbours gathered under the big oak tree behind the cabin, where folding chairs formed a crooked circle and mason jars of lemonade clinked with ice. There was music from a local bluegrass trio, and someone brought a tray of deviled eggs, too early, as if unsure what else to bring to a wedding that wasn't quite a wedding. Because Colton and Willa weren't the kind of couple who needed centerpieces or satin. They needed only this. A girl in a yellow dress walking proudly down the makeshift aisle with a basket of daisies and 2 vows whispered so quietly they barely reached the wind. "I choose you," Willa said. "Every day," Colton replied. "No rings, just carved wooden hearts exchanged by hand, each smoothed by months of sanding, patient as the love that shaped them." And when Daisy wrapped her arms around them both, shouting, "We did it!" no one had a dry eye left. That night, long after the laughter faded, after the chairs were stacked and the cake crumbs swept away, Willa stood in the doorway of the guest house. Their guest house, no longer. She looked around the kitchen, now hers too. On the windowsill sat the heart she'd carved that first spring. Still weathered. Still whole. Colton entered behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You tired? Happy?" she whispered. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. Same thing. Some nights they swayed gently for a moment. No music, just rhythm. Then Willa turned to face him. "I was never supposed to be anyone's miracle," she said. Colton brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You are. I still have scars. So do I. I still grieve. So do I." And yet, Colton echoed, pulling her close. "Here we are." Later that week, Willa hung a small sign on the bakery wall above the register where everyone would see it. It was hand-lettered on cedar, carved by Colton, painted by Daisy. It read, "Some miracles don't arrive all at once. Some walk slowly, stay quietly, and rebuild everything." And below it, a date, the day of the bridge. Not to remember the fall, but the beginning of the rise. And just like that, what began as a rescue on a quiet bridge became the miracle none of them saw coming. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching from? Leave us a comment below and let us know. And if you enjoy stories that remind us of the power of love, kindness, and second chances, feel free to subscribe. We'd be honored to have you with us. Thank you, truly, for spending your time here. We hope this story brought warmth to your day, and maybe even a little hope to your heart. Until next time, take gentle. Would you like help preparing